All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Masculine Minute. I am one of your co-hosts, Matthew Ace Haggerty, and I am joined by the benevolent, the caring, the compassionate Joshua, the ultimate warrior Gillo. Joshua, good morning, man. How are you doing today?
I feel like I'm walking out onto a big boxing ring or something the way you do that. Good morning. I'm doing well, man. Doing well.
Well, today's question we already know, and it is going to be an exciting one. So, without further ado, what is the one? You can only give me one. Actually, you might be able to give me more than one. But when people hear the question, they'll know what we're talking about. What is one thing you'd change about society?
Oh, goodness, Ace. There's so many things that I would change. But the one thing that comes to mind first and foremost is the idea of participation trophies, right? I think our entire country, especially, is plagued by people who do very little involvement in things. They get very little input, and they want to have some kind of praise for doing it. You know, it starts in kindergarten when they graduate kindergarten. What the hell are they graduating technically, right? It's and then they go on and they play a sport, and if they show up, they get a trophy. You know, it's no, that to me is just a thing. And in my perspective of the world, you know, that doesn't that kind of mentality does not extend out into the real life, right? That's like this crazy cooked up version of what reality is, and it's not. The reality is that life is tough, and at times life is going to challenge you. And are you going to step up and wait for your little trophy, or are you going to actually get something done? Right? Are you actually going to make a difference? Are you actually going to work for what you want? Or are you going to expect eventually somebody's going to hand it to you? So that kind of mindset where I'm just entitled to it, or, you know, there's no reason why I shouldn't have it because everybody else does. That's the kind of cancer that kills our culture. So for me, it's about this whole participation trophy bullshit. It's all about how you don't have to work for things, that things would just show up for you. You're entitled to them. That is bullshit. Anything you want in life, you're going to have to work for, and you're going to have to suffer for. And that's the best part about it, is the fact you have to do that to get it. It's not just something that's going to be given to you.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I remember even though when I was a kid, everybody would get a trophy, everybody would get a ribbon just from showing up and participating. So this thing isn't new. I think sometimes we get stuck in these patterns where we think this is like something new, something different. And a lot of things are, a lot of things change. Don't get me wrong. However, I remember in the 80s, mid to late 80s, that's when I was a kid, of getting a participation trophy. And I loved it because you didn't have to work for it. And you felt this like warm feeling inside that you accomplished something, when in reality, yes, showing up is important. Showing up is half the battle. But I guess as a kid, you're kind of forced to sometimes, right? Especially if it's a school event, something like that. But I agree with you 100%. My parents made it, even though there were participation trophies and all that, my parents made it very apparent to me that when I was a child, that you needed to work for what you got. And that was instilled in me in a very early age. However, I feel like there are a lot of entitled people, especially in our country, especially younger generations. But yeah, it's crazy because you lose that drive, you lose that ambition, or maybe you just never get it. You never taste what it feels like to really work your butt off, do something worth being compensated for.
Yeah. No, I can remember clearly as a kid, you know, and I was, you know, in school in the 80s and the 90s. And, you know, I remember very clearly having certain things like you could play, I don't know, for instance, soccer, right? You just show up for soccer practice, whether you played or not, you got a trophy for going there, right? And I remember even back then thinking like, well, you don't even have to be that good and you get a trophy. So what does a trophy mean? A trophy basically means that you showed up for a minimal amount, or maybe a max amount. Doesn't matter whether you played your ass off the whole year and pulled the team, or whether you warmed the bench the whole time. It's because you were there, you got something for it. And that's not how life works, right? Life does not work in that sense. You must produce, you must grow, you must, you know, be part of a bigger team and actually put 100% of effort in order to get stuff from life, right? But when you're prepared and you're wired early on that all I got to do is I just got to say I'm on the team, and I get to say I'm on the team. I don't have to do any work for it. Or I get a blue ribbon or a ribbon because I showed up. You know, that was good. That's all I do, minimum amount. That's it. But when you realize that's not how life works, at least a fulfilling life isn't that way. that you actually have to slave. You have to put the work in there. You actually have to do the thing and do the hard work. They always talk about the 10,000 hours, right, Ace? In order to become very good at something, it takes 10,000 hours. Most people want to skip that part. They just want to go from, I don't know anything about it, to I want to be a master professional in a snap of a finger, because the dark work, as they call it, or the work that needs to be done, but nobody sees, they don't want to do that part. So this participation side of things really irks me, because I know that anything that's good in life is going to take time to earn that and to
That's
work
right.
for it. The hard work is the important part. I just posted the other day a post that said, what did it say? It says success only comes before work in the dictionary, right? Because if it's alphabetical order.
Mm,
So in order to be successful, you must put the work in, and there's no participation trophy for that. Life will eat you up and spit you out if you think that's going to be the case.
yeah. You want to hear something pretty funny?
Sure.
So I went to Berkeley for graduate school, highly educated, did very well in college. And I remember joking around with a few friends because people that went to Cal for graduate school came from all over the place. Some pretty prestigious schools all over the country came to Berkeley. And I remember joking around because it was difficult. Don't get me wrong. However, you could see some of that entitlement too in academia. And so people that participated paid the fees. There was a joke that would go around, I think it was for Harvard, and it was pay the fees, get a C, or something like that. Pay the fee, get a C. And there was a lot of truth to that. And I just remember thinking about that when I was in college. I was like, man, like this is hard as shit. Like this is not easy work. However, at the
Right.
same time, if you pay the fees and you show up and you give the minimal amount of effort, you'll get a C. And you'll see that in a lot of the higher echelons universities, um, the Ivy League schools and things like that. If you're able to meet the requirements and get in and pay the tuition, you just need a pulse pretty much at that point.
Yeah.
You have to egregiously show a lack of interest or a lack of effort for them to actually fail you. Because at that point, you've met all the requirements. It gets very political. And it's just so funny that things like that seem to happen even in the reality of the world. I don't want to get into politics. I personally don't know politics, but from things that I've heard, it doesn't sound like it's too different from these pay the fee, get a C type mentality, get a trophy for everything. So it continues in our life. The
Yeah.
privileged in certain capacities will continue to be privileged. And it just blows my mind in a capitalist country that something like this can happen. But we know capitalism isn't perfect, and the way that it's run in this country isn't perfect. However, um, it blows my mind sometimes that how people can just coast through life and feel good about what they're doing when they're really doing nothing good at all.
Yep. Now, when I went to graduated high school, I went to Lincoln Tech, which is a local technical institute, for 2 years for architectural drafting and engineering. And during that time, we started off with over 40 people in our class. It was going to be just a big class. It was one of their biggest classes then. And we filled the room. It was great. A lot of guys and girls in there that wanted to learn the same thing I wanted to learn. It was great. Crazy part is, fast forward about 2 years later, during graduation, there was 8 of us. Right. And what happened is, during that process, a lot of them realized that they had to put the work in. This wasn't going to be easy. I'll never
Yeah.
forget our finals, what they called it, or I don't remember exact word, but basically our final, we had to create and design an entire building structure, an entire layout, all of these things, all the way down to every single detail of the building. And I remember at the very end, there was a choice that you could not necessarily choose, but there was options for who you wanted to grade your project, right? And you would pick. And I know that the school said, hey, you've got these 2 teachers, and they were the 2 easiest teachers to do the grading of this. And there was a stand-up part. You had to do like a speech about what you did. You had to do a presentation. You had to lay it all out, explain why you did everything you did. Anyway, and I remember, after working my ass off for the entire last semester on this project, that the last thing I wanted, Ace, was somebody that was going to be easy to give me just an easy grade. And I saw so many of people that were left, those last 8, so many of them that said that, you know what, I want to go after the easiest one so I can get the best grade. And it was amazing to me that people would go line up for the easy grade because they wanted the highest grade. And I said, no, that's not how this works. I want the most honest grade. So I picked the two hardest professors to go through and stand in front of them. And I'll never forget how nervous I was to have that, do that presentation. It was one of my first presentations that way. And I was so worried I wasn't going to be able to last the 20 minutes worth of conversation they were expecting. And I could tell at a certain point they started getting uneasy, and they're like, I was like, hey, what's going on? He's like, we're way past our 20 minutes here. And I was worried about getting 20 minutes of content for them. And it was just amazing how that worked. Ended up getting I think it was a B+ or an A-. And I felt like that was an honest grade for the honest work done. And I could see others that got much higher grades, but I know damn well that they didn't earn it, but they didn't care. It was all about the grade for them. So I don't say that to make myself look better. I say that because in life, you're going to get what you choose. If you choose the easy path, you're going to get falsity. You're going to get grades that don't exactly line up for how much effort you put in. And if you say, look, I'm going to take the harder trail and I'm going to get an honest feedback, that'll give you something better to work with for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I always appreciated the professors that were much more difficult, gave me honest feedback, and pretty much kicked my ass.
Yep.
I have so much more respect for those individuals because they actually care, and it showed. So
100%.
All right,
brother, what's yours? What
Let's
would you, one thing you'd change about society?
One thing. I only get one?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I would say the thing that kind of just jumps off the page for me is this cancel culture bullshit. We didn't have it when I was younger. This came around, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And I started to hear about people getting canceled. And it was like, okay, so people that are bigots, people that are racist, I can get on board with that, like there's no room for hate in this world. But then certain people started to get canceled for just speaking their opinion. And it was just like this pendulum that, a lot of these things start off as good ideas, but at the same time, it's pretty scary too, because whether it is hate speech or anything like that, and trust me, I'm not condoning any of that. However, our First Amendment is freedom of speech. Like, we are a country founded on people being able to express themselves, express their opinions. And it just kind of blows my mind because now it's become this thing where, yes, voice your opinion, but if it doesn't match our opinion, you're canceled.
Yep.
And I don't want to make it a left or a right thing, but it just blows my mind how certain sides of the political spectrum kind of dictate who gets canceled and who doesn't get canceled, especially in entertainment and media and people that have a larger platform. And so this whole concept of cancel culture, like at first I was like, yeah, there's no place for hate. But then it just started to expand for there's no place for a differing opinion.
Yep.
And it just blew my mind. And I just couldn't get on board with something like that because it just goes against the fundamental upbringing that I had as an American, that we have certain rights. And the most fundamental right that we've had in this country since its inception is freedom of speech. And to think that people can get silenced, people can get quote unquote canceled for just speaking their opinion that other people don't agree with, that just blows my mind. And I think that teaches our society really that if you don't fall in line, then you're going to be an outcast. You're going to be a black sheep. You're going to be a prodigal son. And it sucks because then now it's dictated by a certain group of people saying that this is right and everything else isn't. And that just doesn't sit well with me at all.
No, dude, you and me both. The crazy part is we saw it during COVID. We saw all the big social media platforms take a hard stance when it came to where they stood on vaccinations and how the entire thing should have been handled, right? And what was amazing was the fact that it was so obvious. When it come to anything that was anti-government message, it was immediately put up as fact checkers, like, check your facts, this isn't true. Now, obviously, there's a lot of bullshit going around too during that time, but you would all the information that was contrary to what the government or the medical model was putting out there was constantly being fact checked, but none of their stuff was being fact checked, or very little of it. And you started to see a bias. You started to see who was in charge and what was going on. And what really woke me up during that time was to realize how much of the stuff we see on social media is being censored in one direction, right?
Yeah.
You can see the agenda behind it. Newspapers have done this forever. but you just didn't have an opportunity to see another side. Now with social media, you can actually see it on the other side. You can ask other people, well, okay, this is the story we're being told, but is this what you're actually seeing on the ground if something's happening in a city or whatever it might be? And like, yeah, no, this isn't at all what it is. These riots really aren't happening like this. They're just trying to make it like a big deal. And it's amazing how that can be adjusted. And now that these platforms are owned by corporations, they can adjust for any bias they want, and they're going to then basically impact the entire vision of a nation or the world based on their agenda. And that's the part that really pisses me off the most, because we all know that, not all, but a lot of us know that this stuff is crap, yet most will just follow it because they don't want to have to think.
Yeah.
They don't want to be shunned. You mentioned that earlier, feeling like an outcast. They don't want to be shunned. So they're going to just believe what everybody else believes, so they don't have to stand on their own or do any research on their own. They want to just stand there and be like, you know what? I just want to be like them, so they like me. I don't really care if it's true or not. And that's why this perpetuates. That's why this stuff happens. It's because most don't have the balls to stand up. And as men, it is our duty to stand up for what's right and stand up for our family, and to make sure that they have a society and a world that they can live in, that they're going to be proud of to raise their children in. And I feel like so much of that has fallen to the wayside because it's so much easier and better to just be part of the tribe than it is to actually stand up for what you believe in. And that was something that came out very clear during those times the last few years.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned this because we were talking earlier about getting a trophy for participating. It feels like people
Yeah.
that just followed the government, especially during COVID, got their little trophy, right? They
Oh
got
yeah.
their little bit of money. They got to stay home and really do nothing, get paid to do nothing. I don't know about you. My experience during COVID was, I'm not going to jump too much into this, but my experience during COVID was completely different. I didn't stop working. I was one of those people that was driving around, nobody on the freeway, nobody anywhere, still inspecting buildings, doing design work, everything. My life did not stop at all. I continued working. I continued doing what I needed to do to provide for my family. And it's so interesting. COVID was a very interesting time in that it exposed how much power and influence the governments all over the world have over us. But two, it really separated people between people that are wanting to control their lives themselves and work and be responsible, and the people that are, kind of just like, all right, I'll take the trophy, I'll take the ribbon,
Mhm.
I'll get the pat on the head for showing up and participating in this thing called life. And yeah, it boggled my mind. I'm in Tennessee. I got to see it from a Tennessee lens, but all my friends and family that I grew up with are from California. And just talking to them and the few amount of times I would go to visit California, I felt like I was in a different country. It
Yeah.
was so crazy, the differences between Tennessee, and I know a lot of states were like Tennessee and a lot of states were like California, but just the complete divide, not only in the rules and regulations that were going on, but the mindset
Mhm.
around things. It absolutely blew my mind. So yeah, it's crazy how and then if you spoke out about it, you got canceled. It's such
Yep. Yep.
bullshit. So
What was amazing during that time is to see how many just blindly followed whatever they were told, because they didn't want to have to do the thinking. All that was just way too much work. So they just followed whatever the CDC said or whatever the government said or whatever their family was doing. That's what they had to do. And it was so incredible to see how fast that happened. And I feel like so many were looking around like, you know what? They snapped a finger, they were doing it, and they're like, oh, look at me. Look how much I want to be ruled over. Look how much I want to follow the rules. I'm such a good rule follower. Look at me. I'm doing exactly what they told me. And you're not, you're out. You're
yeah,
horrible. You're a horrible person because you're not going to line up for the shit that they're
you're
telling us.
killing grandma.
Yeah.
You're
Over and
killing
over again.
grandma.
Crazy shit, Ace.
Yeah, no, I think what our questions actually really come down to, and you just said this, control.
Yeah.
If you're not in control of your life, if you're not taking leadership and stepping up for your family, for your community, taking control of your life, you are being controlled by somebody else,
Yep.
whether it's our government, our society, your employer, your friends, your family. Someone else is controlling your life if you're not controlling it. And guess what? Life doesn't always give you a ribbon for showing up. Sometimes it does. And when it does, you got to really think what the hell is going on right now, because if you're getting a ribbon for just showing up, the real world doesn't work that way. There's always a catch. There's no such thing as a free lunch,
That's right.
as I learned in my econ class. Um, but yeah, this really just comes down to control. And we
Absolutely.
don't want you to be controlled. We want you to take control of your life. And you do it by showing up every single morning,
And
questioning
working for it.
things,
And
and
working for it.
working your ass off.
That's
That's
right.
for darn sure, man. Well, I think we've hit it. Joshua,
Ace,
always appreciate your opinion, man. And
right back at you, brother.
yeah, man. For everybody listening, thank you for checking in on the Masculine Minute. Follow us, subscribe. What is it? Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Check all of it out. Support this. Tell a friend. This is how this show will continue to grow. Tell somebody you know who can benefit from this. We really appreciate it. Subscribe once again. And Joshua, have a freaking fantastic day, brother.
You too, bro. Have a good one.